Hi, I think we're live. Thank you for joining my presentation. I hope you're well, hope you had a lovely solstice. My name is Natasa Ilincic. I am an author and artist. You may know my work from a compendium of witches and the Tarot of the Witch's Garden, which was published a few months ago here. So this is one. And this is the other. So when Llewellyn approached me about holding a presentation, I gave them a few different themes to choose from. And one of them was the creation of my book and deck. And the other one was the painting of the Tarot of the Witch's Garden. So like showcasing the behind the scenes and the practical aspects of its creation, sketches, painting process, and so on. And then the third one was the roots of traditional female tattooing in the Balkans, which is a subject that is very close to my heart. And I thought it would be a bit too niche, so I was quite surprised when that one was picked. And I hope it's something that you'll find interesting as well. So at the end, I hope we'll have some time to answer questions. If you have any, it might be smart to hold on to them until the end so that we don't lose them in the chat. So as you may know, my background is in archaeology and cultural anthropology, and this is a subject that I have researched during my master's thesis. In 2016, I traveled to the rural highlands of Bosnia to speak to the last elderly women who have these tattoos. There are various tattooing traditions in the Balkans, and this is one of them. This is the one that I will be focusing on for this half an hour. But you know, just so you know, it's not the only one. So let's see if I can share the slideshow with you. I'm not sure it's working. Okay. Okay, I'll try again. Let's see if this works. Perfect, here we go. Okay, just so that you have a bit of a visual, so it's not just me talking. Okay, so this specific custom is called Botsanya or Sitsanya, and depending on the region, you know, where you go. So it could be called Botsanya in central Bosnia and Sitsanya in Dalmatia. And this translates as prickling. So it's the action itself of working with the needle on the skin. The area that we are looking at are the Central Balkans, mainly Bosnia, and this was mostly widespread among the Catholic population. Its roots, however, are prehistoric and pre-Christian, as I will discuss later on. This was almost done exclusively by women, on women, starting from the early teenage years and usually until they would get married, almost as a coming-of-age ritual. But interestingly enough, a coming-of-age ritual that would continue each year, because these tattoos were not just done once, they would be done year after year. And it was a collective social activity. The girls and women would sometimes tattoo each other. Other times there will be an older woman, more experienced woman doing the tattooing, someone who had done it before or who was particularly skilled. And they would usually do it together in early spring during something that was called prelo, which is a sort of a gathering connected to the action of weaving, but that incorporated many other elements as well. Each person was free to choose their own designs, and they would often add new tattoos each spring. So it's almost as if these tattoos are blossoming on the skin together with nature blossoming around them. On some occasions, men would ask the tattooer to, have a small tattoo as well, like usually a cross, but that was quite rare. It did happen, however, so I thought I'd mention that as well. Women, on the other hand, with this cyclical tattooing done each spring, they would end up with hands and arms completely covered with these symbols. Sometimes they would feature them on their chest and forehead as well. Now, with the woman that I spoke to, this was not so much the case, but earlier on, the designs were even more ornate. So it seems like they got lost a bit with time. To do the tattooing, they would usually use a needle and an ink preparation, and this mix could be made with different ingredients. The base was always soot, and to that they would add a solvent, and this could be water, it could be spit, it could be milk, sometimes human milk, it could be honey, as well as rakia, which is a fruit brandy. And some sources mention fat as well. Sometimes they would have a certain requirement for milk. So like it would have to be milk from a woman who had a blue-eyed son that specific year, or milk from a sheep that was black, or from a specific from a cow that had a specific lactation stage, and so on. And then they would draw these symbols using the needle itself, or sometimes a quill, and they would start botsati. They would start the needling, the prickling with the needles. In some areas of Herzegovina, which is a region, natural stencils were used as well. They're called kalupi. And these were made. They would be made with fig leaves, which are, quite wide, quite big, thick leaves as well. So I could see them being used for this quite well. Or a thin sheet of bark. This would usually be from South European ash or field maple or carnelian cherry. Now about the symbols. These can be divided between 5 main categories. We have the križ, the cross, and this is the most popular symbol, sometimes drawn in a very simple way, sometimes in a more ornate way, like featuring side branches and dots, as you can see. And then we would have the kolo, the circle, and this includes all circular motifs. They sometimes contain crosses as well. Sometimes they're just left blank on the inside, and they are often surrounded by the rays that you see. It's interesting to notice that kolo is also a traditional group dance in Bosnia and Herzegovina, in Croatia, and Macedonia, Serbia, Montenegro. And as I mentioned earlier, these tattoos were mostly widespread among Catholic population, but the roots themselves are not Christian, and the symbols are not Christian. The only one that could be interpreted as Christian is the cross. However, the cross is also a pre-Christian motive. It's often connected with sun worship, and it's such an elementary shape that it can be, it has been seen across so many different cultures all around the world in different historical periods. And I'm sure that the people who used them during the Christian centuries, after Christianization, they used them because they resembled a cross, but before then, who knows? The cross and circle are close to solar and astral symbology, as you can imagine, and the circles especially are sometimes referred to as sun and moon, which is, very descriptive and very clear. You often see this partition in 4 as well. This reminds us of the 4 seasons, of the 4 elements, the 4 cardinal directions, even the 4 lunar phases. Whereas the circular motive evokes life, death, rebirth. Then we have the Nárukvica, the bracelet. This is called Nárukvica because of the area where it's tattooed, like the placement, which is around the wrist. And it can vary from quite simple to quite intricate. Usually it would not continue on the inside, so it would just stop here. And this is because this area is a bit too sensitive, a bit too dangerous, especially if these were just made by, kids, teenagers, women in their 20s who maybe were not even, that skilled in what they were doing. Some of these things are quite amateurish in a way. The bracelet seems to be mostly decorative, but some of them have patterns that can be seen as almost like snake-like patterns. And it's interesting to note that the snake was extremely important in the religious practices of the Illyrians, who were the ancient inhabitants of the Balkans. They even have a serpent cult, and I think the name Illyrian is directly connected to the word snake in Proto-Indo-European. Then we have the Ogreda, the fence. This is a semicircular motif surrounded that was used to surround other symbols, usually tattooed on the chest, sometimes on the hand, and sometimes just above the elbow on this area here. The symbol of the fence is a bit trickier to interpret, is not that straightforward. The name leads me to believe that it was called this way because of the placement and not because of its meaning, because it usually surrounds and frames other symbols. Then we have the Granchitsa, the twig, the sprig. This is sometimes also called Ilinčić, which translates as the small fir tree. It's a botanical motive, as you can see, that reminds you of twigs and trees and leaves. In some ways, I find that it echoes the tree of life as well. And then we have records from the 1600s, 1700s of folk songs that mention tattoos and describe them using very specific terminology relating to the animal kingdom. So you have the mention of the bear paw and the horseshoe and the wolf paw as well. And we don't know what these symbols look like. So it's clear that there's a whole wealth of knowledge here that has been lost to time because it was not recorded. It's interesting to note that the placement of these tattoos varies, but something that they all have in common is that they were tattooed on areas that are quite visible, so they were meant to be seen. They were used as communication, essentially, and for what? That's a whole different debate, and with a whole lot of hypotheses around why these tattoos were used. Also interesting to note that the tattoos were modular, so You could combine a Granchitsa with a cross, with a color, and these designs would be often quite original because they were just made according to what the person felt like having tattooed on themselves. Now we'll talk a little bit about the possible meanings. Now here in the picture you see Perka, Maria, and Angela. These are three of the women that I interviewed during my field research. And they're proudly showing their tattoos. So as to why these symbols were tattooed, people have different explanations. Some say the tattoos were used as a sign of distinction by the Catholics. We're talking about an area that has multiple ethnicities and multiple religious practices. So we have Catholics, we have Orthodox people, we have Muslim. Some say that the reason these tattoos were applied was to protect people, and especially women, from being taken by the Ottomans during the Ottoman occupation in Bosnia. And this is something that remained quite strongly in the collective memory of the Balkans. We know that during the Turkish occupation, mainly 15th and 16th century, Bosnia was a reservoir for what was called the devshirme, but literally means collection. It's often referred to as the blood tax. This was an Ottoman practice for forcibly recruiting soldiers among children in the Balkans, among Christian subjects. The boys would be taken as soldiers, the girls as servants or worse. Many people also claim that there is no real religious significance to these tattoos, that they're just ornamental markings, decorative tattoos used to enhance women's beauty. And this is something that was mentioned quite frequently by the women that I interviewed. When asked, so why did people tattoo these in the past? They would say, oh, in the past it was because of the Ottomans, but we tattooed them because we liked them, because they made us beautiful. Now, looking at the archaeology a bit, I don't know how well you can see these images that I'm sharing. Hopefully well enough to see the little details and tattoos that are depicted on the arms and the legs. So we know that the tattoos were not Christian because even the Bible very straightforwardly prohibits the use of tattoos. They were not Slavic, brought during the Slavic migrations in the Balkans, because there is no recorded history of early medieval Slavic tattoos. They are not Roman either, and that leaves us with what came before. And we know that tattooing was present among the ancient inhabitants of the Balkans, the Illyrians, and as it was among the neighboring Thracians and Dacians. We have various writers from classical antiquity report this, like Herodotus, and there's a Greek poet called Herondas as well. Of the big ones, we have Plutarch and Strabo and Cicero. They all talk about these Thracian tattoos. Artisans of the time, as you can see, also reported them. So we have visual depictions of what they looked like from ancient Greek vases. Interestingly enough, we have some documentation from just across the Adriatic, from Daunian funerary monuments in southern Italy that present very similar markings, as you can see from the image. The Daunians were one of the Illyrian groups that migrated from the eastern Adriatic to Italy during the Bronze Age. So I thought it's quite interesting that we have them among the Illyrian cousins across the Adriatic as well. Now, looking at Neolithic cultures like Cucuteni and Karanovo and Vinča, that's cultures that space from the Carpathian Mountains to the Balkans. it's interesting to note that we find these female statues with markings, perhaps indicating that tattooing traditions were present in the area as well, but we can't really know that for sure. I mean, these markings that you see there could be paintings, they could be tattoos, they could be scars, like ritual scarring. So, you know, we don't know, but it's a possibility that I thought mentioned because it's an interesting area to explore. So the theory here, at least my theory based on what I've researched, is that tattooing was present among the Illyrians. We don't know whether it originated with them, but it was definitely present. It survived during the Slavic migrations, and Christian conversion was probably preserved in these remote mountains because of the geography of the area, which is quite hard to access. There are plenty of rivers, but not all of them are navigable. So, you know, it's what happens with many mountainy areas. If you just look at the Basque country in Spain and how mountains have this amazing power of retaining what's there because they're so isolated and difficult to reach. So the tattoos were then repurposed by during the Ottoman occupation as a distinctive ethnic sign, and after the liberation of from the Ottoman forces, it was kept as mostly a decorative mark of beauty, probably going back to what its original meaning was, its original use was, but sadly stripped of all these pre-Christian and pagan, spiritual and cosmological meanings and knowledge, and that was inevitably lost because it's something that's very difficult to just keep when you're not recording things down. These are 3 other ladies that were kind enough to talk to me about their tattoos. We know that this tradition started dying in the 50s for multiple reasons. Tattoos started being seen as an outdated, obsolete practice. There was a certain reluctance in displaying symbols showcasing ethnicity during the period that was known as Druga Yugoslavia. And there's also the influence of schooling and education, so tattoos were not seen as proper anymore to have. There's definitely a certain revival now. I have some of these tattoos as well, but we can't really call that a continuation because the cultural and social environment is really no longer the same. Today, you know, we pick a design, we go to a tattoo artist in accordance with health and safety regulations, and we get our tattoo. We don't gather around the fireplace during the prelo with a friend who is tattooing these symbols on our hands with soot and you know, like mother's milk, while others are weaving wool and singing and weaving baskets. So it's a completely different environment, which is why perhaps revival is a better term than continuation. That's pretty much me summing up hundreds of pages of writing into a 20-minute presentation, but hopefully this at least gives you just a general idea of what this practice was and what it looked like. My whole dissertation is available on the University of Venice website if you want to read it, but it's in Italian. So if you know Italian, go and read it. If not, Google Translate might help a little bit. I am in the process of translating it into English, but I haven't researched publishers yet. I have a feeling that it's a bit too niche for any big traditional publisher, but failing that, I'll just go the self-publishing route because it would just be nice to make this available to people. If you'd like to keep updated, there's my newsletter. It's probably a little bit more reliable than social media, because the algorithm can be a bit hit and miss. And if you have any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. I think we have about 5 minutes. And if I can't answer everything, feel free to send them on my Instagram, and then I'll continue the Q&A in my Instagram stories. So, you know, so that you're not left with questions that you may want answered. Okay, so do you think you would eventually broaden your research to female tattooing in other cultures as well? I did. I had to do that, you know, when I was researching for this, because I had to get a general sense of how this worked in other cultures as well. But it was mostly general, you know, general information. I would really like to delve deeper into other cultures as well. The advantage that I had with this research was that I knew the language. So when I went to Bosnia, I could actually speak to these old women. And I think you really need to do that to do effective field research in anthropology. You need to immerse yourself in the culture. So if I did that for other cultures, it would have to be, you know, done in a serious and attentive way, I suppose. I'd love to hear more about the folk songs you mentioned that have lyrics about tattooing. Okay, so I actually have the text of these, and I'll pop that in my Instagram stories as well. I think the ones I have are from 17th or 18th century, and they're folk songs. It's quite interesting, you know, in one single song they mention quite a few of these tattoo names, which is quite a rare find. Mother's milk makes so much sense as far as something the body would more readily accept. Yeah, I can see that. I can see that. Then again, in the area where I was in Bosnia, they mostly just used water. So water and soot. Soot taken from underneath what's called a peka, which is a clay object that is used to cook meat underneath. And yeah. Were you able to do any research on Egyptian tattooing? I haven't, no, but that sounds so interesting. It's like you wish you had more hours in the day to do all of this. Okay, I'm just reading through the chat to see if we have any other questions. I've noticed that tattooing has been seen as a woman's practice or something traditionally done by women across multiple cultures. Any idea why this might be the case? That's a very good question. I think that you could write a whole book about this. And I don't think I have a specific theory about it for now, but it's definitely something that it's worth researching. I mean, we do see this in areas of the Maghreb where women are getting these specific tattoos, but not men so much. We see that in Albania and in other cultures as well. So it's definitely a common denominator, and it's worth asking why. I unfortunately don't have the answer yet. Okay, I think we're reaching 5:30. Well, 5:30 here in Scotland. We may have time for maybe one more question before we close the presentation. Yes, Llewellyn is confirming time for one more. If you're in Scotland, have you researched the Picts? I have, and they're extremely fascinating, both in terms of what has been left here, as well as what hasn't. The Picts are a very mysterious people. And again, it's interesting when cultures leave mostly symbols behind and we're left with just our imagination and bits of information to research them. But yeah, I think that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. I thought this would be quite a niche topic, and I wasn't quite sure if many people would be interested, but no, it's nice to hear good feedback. And if you have any other questions, feel free to get in contact either by email or social media. And yeah, I'm here.